IMF proposes more taxes, higher interest rate after subsidy removal. Welcome to the news and thank you for tuning in to listen. Please subscribe to our channel. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) on Friday said for Nigeria's forced subsidy removal policy and foreign exchange unification initiative to translate to economic growth and stability, the federal government must collect more taxes to fund the national budget and pay public debts. The IMF Africa Department Director Abebe Selassie made the position known during a press briefing of the Sub-Saharan African Regional Economic Outlook on the ongoing World Bank Group International Monetary Fund meeting in Marrakech, Morocco. He spoke against the backdrop of the harsh economic conditions in Nigeria on the back of the removal of fuel subsidy and foreign exchange unification by President Bola Tinubu after taking office in late May. The deregulation of the downstream oil sector has pushed petrol prices from about 185 naira per litre to about 600 naira per litre, a development that has caused pain and untold hardships for more Nigerians. Aside from these, policies aimed at unifying the official and parallel market rate of a naira announced in early June by the government have worsened the sharp rise in the prices of goods and services following the jump in the pump price of petrol. Despite the initial savings made from fuel subsidy removal by the federal government, over 90% of governmental revenue still goes into debt servicing and leaving it with a meager amount to cater to a major economic growth and development project. However, the IMF said on Friday that Nigerian policymakers must urgently complement the fuel subsidy removal with a set of policies that could ameliorate economic challenges facing the country. Selassie said the exchange rate reforms that the government did were very, very welcome, trying to unify the rate, similarly the fuel subsidy. But that will not help and will not stick unless you're also tightening monetary policy, unless you're also doing something to mobilize more tax revenues. So as a holistic package of reforms is what is needed. So you have a medley of things mainly rooted in the fiscal challenges that Nigeria had faced, not having tax revenues at the same time. This country is a country with incredible potential, and we have seen reforms moving in the right direction in recent months. What is needed, we feel, is making the reforms holistic and help reinforce each other. Just as things were not reinforcing each other in the past, I think there is scope to make the reforms reinforce each other. The IMF director noted that Nigeria had over-relied on oil revenue, making it difficult to tap its potential in other areas. He said, and I quote, "Why are there not enough tax revenues? I think in the past, over-reliance on oil was when prices were high. Second, of course, also is the subsidy regime, which also entails quite a lot of loss of government resources being directed where they perhaps should not be. So I think that these are all interlinked issues, including causing some of the inflation that you're seeing, because given the difficulty to tap international capital markets, the government has had to rely more on domestic financing, which has either crowded out the private sector or, of course, caused the monetary injection, which again has weakened the exchange rate." Selassie, however, said the leaders at the Central Bank of Nigeria and the Ministry of Finance were new, adding that there was a need to give them more time to act. He expressed confidence in their ability to make the right economic decisions, saying, "I think we have to give them a bit of time to the new administration. Also, the Central Bank governor has just been appointed. The Minister of Finance has only been in office for a few weeks. So we are hopeful that they will move in the right direction, and we stand there to provide any policy advice the government needs." On Nigeria's debt, the IMF director said the country leaders had yet to initiate any discussion on debt cancellation or forgiveness. The Debt Management Office shows data that Nigeria had a total debt of $103.4 billion as of June 30, 2023. The IMF director said, I am not aware of any discussions that are going on debt profiling and restructuring in Nigeria. There are, of course, like elsewhere in the region, debt pressures. And I think in Nigeria, by far, the most important cause of the pressure is the fact that government does not generate enough tax revenues for all the services it needs to provide. So, interest payment as a share of revenues is very high and not leave much room to spend on other issues. I think that is the key issue and on other issues. I think that is a key issue and the one that needs to be worked on. He also said Nigeria's debt was still manageable, but noted that more revenue must be generated to services. When we look at the debt in Nigeria, our sense is that the stock is manageable in general. It is the debt servicing that is much more difficult, and the debt servicing is hampered. And as I said earlier, by the country not generating enough non-oil tax revenues. I think that is by far the most important area of reform, by far the most important area of work that there is for any administration in Nigeria, Selassie added. Forex ban removal. The IMF has supported the CBN's removal of forex ban on 43 items. Selassie said, and I quote, "On the trade restrictions, our view has always been that in Nigeria, as in many other cases, our economies now are so sophisticated and too complex. I do not think that these kinds of restrictions work. The best way to manage modern economies is for the government authorities to use the both fiscal lever and monetary policy lever to affect the kind of outcomes rather than going in and saying, I do not like this, so I do not want it to come in, etc. That tends to create an helpful distortion, but in general, I think the direction that the CBN has moved is a helpful one. Look inwards. Meanwhile, the IMF has advised the Nigerian government and other economies in sub-Saharan Africa to look inwards for funding, pointing out that the foreign loans are becoming scarce and costly. It said this in its Regional Outlook report. The report read in part, and I quote, Sub-Saharan Africa is only now emerging from a series of unprecedented global shocks and is still in the grips of an acute funding squeeze. On the positive side, global inflation is receding and international financial conditions are starting to ease, but the underlying funding challenge may still endure. The crisis has demonstrated the risk of relying on volatile private capital market for development funding, while other traditional sources such as official development assistance and bilateral lending are shrinking. Now, I like the way that they're giving advices and they're telling Nigeria what to do. But the thing is it going to work in Nigeria? Why? Because because there is money to steal. I mean, I'm going to use this word very raw because there is money to steal and mismanage. Everybody abandoned. Everybody is too lazy to come in and actually create other means of revenue because not only oil day, we don't have insightful leaders. We don't have leaders who have the desire to help this country, burning in them. All we have is people who have they have a very huge appetite to come and take and take and take until nothing is left of us. All right, and just note we've come to the end of the news. So thank you for tuning in to listen. Until I come your way next time. Enjoy the rest of your day.